Hello. Hi, Danielle. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, me too. I am really looking forward to this conversation about leading through change and how you can empower employees to lead themselves through change as
Mhm.
well. Because I think, as everybody who's listening will know, more and more of leadership today is all about change. The world is always changing, constantly having to adapt to new things, and it's definitely a challenge that a lot of leaders face.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Before we dive in, though, share a little bit about your background because it's truly impressive, and I think it will help people to kind of situate you in this space.
Yeah, so I spent 15 years, over 15 years in medical sales. So I've always had a passion for sales, particularly medical sales. So I started my career in the dental industry as an individual contributor. And then after I was recruited into the medical aesthetic industry, where for the past 7 years, while I was working in corporate, I was leading a team for a Fortune 500 organization. And while I was with that team, I led them through restructuring, downsizing, an attempted hostile takeover of a competitor. It was quite the journey in through that
Hmm.
experience, but I learned so much about leadership while I was with the organization. And for the past 3 years, I have been on my own and I have been creating and facilitating and leading leadership and sales performance programs, particularly for people in medical sales and other industries as well. So I've been very, very fortunate to thoroughly enjoy my career and what I do, but more importantly, being able to make a positive impact in helping people achieve their goals.
Yeah, well, that definitely sounds like it would have been a baptism of fire in terms of a leadership program. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, let's dive right in. So, what are the biggest things that you learned in that process about leading people through change?
Well, within the first 2 years that I was a manager, and when I stepped into a leadership role, I was brand new to the organization. I had no direct management experience, and I
Mm,
stepped into a leadership role for the first time. So it was a big adjustment. It was a big learning experience as well. And within the first 2 years, of me being in a leadership role, my husband had joined the army and
okay.
he was gone for 6 months. So, professionally and personally, there was a lot of change going on in my life. But within the first 2 years, that was really where people have said I experienced more within the first 2 years of leading a team than most managers do in 15 years. And the reason
Mm,
being is the organization that I was with, there was an attempted hostile takeover from a competitor. So, a
mm.
competitor was secretly buying shares of the organization and was trying to take us over, which would have created a monopoly within the industry. Now, we were able to fend them off. However, it required us to go through significant restructuring. We lost 20% of their sales force. My team was affected the most. I lost 4 out of 8 people in one day due to
Oh,
layoffs.
wow.
Yes, and then people that remained were reassigned to different territories, and then also the company was acquired by a larger organization. So you're talking about a big culture shift as well. And
Mm,
what I found through that experience is we all adapt and respond to change differently. And what's most important is that we're creating a psychologically safe environment for people to express how they're feeling.
hmm.
There's what's called the 5 stages of grief, where psychologists have studied grief and how people respond to grief. And I
Hmm.
say, how can we take those 5 stages and apply it to how we respond to change? And it starts with sometimes denial, the denial
Yep.
of the fact that did we just go through layoffs? I can't believe this just happened. Then the next is anger. I can't believe I just lost my coworkers. Why are we going through this? Then there's the bargaining, the what ifs. Well, what
Hmm.
if what if we weren't going through a hostile takeover? What if we didn't go through restructuring? Then there can get into depression for some people because there's the fear, there's the there's their survivor's guilt that they're glad they have a job, but then at the same time, there's fear that there's potential layoffs in the future. And then eventually we get to acceptance. But as a
Hmm.
leader, a lot of times when change happens, we're the first to know. So we're able to process our emotions, and then our team finds out, and we get to help them in processing their emotions and meeting them where they're at and any stages when they're adapting to change.
Yeah. I think I can definitely resonate with that sort of, finding yourself in a leadership position with no previous experience and no support. And I think a lot of people can. There was a research study in the UK recently which showed that something like 82% of leaders have never had any formal management training. And these are people all the way up to the top of like C-suite roles, never been
Mhm.
taught anything about leadership. So that's a really challenging place to be. But in particularly in change, I think you hit on something there where you're like, oh well, we as leaders, we often know first, so we can then have chance to process and move on. But so often that's not true. You're still
Mhm.
going through those stages. Maybe you're afraid of your job, for your job. Sorry, not afraid of your job, at the same time as you're then
Mhm.
having to create that safe environment for your employees to express their fear, their anger, their denial, while you're still going through that yourself.
That was particularly the situation I found myself in this. See, I was very fortunate. The organization that I worked for really invested in professional development. I
Mm,
will say the organization I work for every single year invested in their employees' professional and personal development. So I was very fortunate. But in this particular situation, I was not made aware of the layoffs. In
mm,
fact, I was on a field co-travel with somebody on my team, and the only warning I got that day was a phone call from my director of sales, and my director of sales said, "You have a job, but don't answer your phone today." That was the only warning I got.
right.
And so I, of course, was confused as what he meant by this, like, and curious as to why he's even making those two statements. And then I ended up going back into a customer meeting with my colleague, a member of my team, and as we left the customer meeting, my colleague ended up receiving some phone calls from other members of our team. And one by one, people were calling her, letting her know that they had been laid off.
Mm,
So it was a member that I had just hired. She was brand new to the team. She was a single, resilient mom. She had been laid off. There
mm,
was somebody who was the more tenured rep on my team, who was somebody that I sought to as the leader on our team. She had been laid off. There was somebody who was on medical leave who was battling breast cancer, and she was laid off. And so one by one, I was hearing of these layoffs, not directly from leadership. I was hearing them from somebody on my team that was answering the phone from the individuals that were being laid off.
mm,
And that was really hard because I wasn't really able, I didn't feel like at the time able to support my team because I was finding out the news at the same time. So I was going through the emotions with them, and they're coming to me wanting answers, and I had no answers because I had no idea what was going on. And I think that was a mishap with
mm,
our executive leader. Um, I think that if you are really want to set your management team up for success, it's important that you give them some sort of notification ahead of time, as well as provide them with some resources, some talking points, some training on how to support their team while they're going through changes. Could you imagine if the person that I was with that day had been laid off? Thankfully, she
yeah,
wasn't. She wasn't. Otherwise, that would have been a really uncomfortable car ride.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I completely agree that it's in an ideal situation, you are going to have that kind of warning. You're going to have
Mhm.
some communications like, this is the party line, this is what we're saying to people. And yeah, you would hope that you are also in an environment where there is some consideration for the people who are staying compared to the people who aren't, and how do you manage those kind of relationships. I know that employment law differs depending on where you are, and kind of
Yeah.
how much sort of notice you might have to
Mhm.
give someone for that kind of change. There are some places in Europe where it can be sort of 6 months worth of consultations before, in a kind of
Wow.
merger situation, before you can start letting people know. So everyone's aware and everyone's got a long time to kind of think about it
Mhm.
before they get to the point of actually leaving. But that doesn't mean that they've gone all the way through those 5 stages and
Mhm.
gotten to the point of acceptance, which
Mhm.
leads me to a question. I was thinking as you were saying that you might, I might assume as a leader in those circumstances that my job is to almost fast track people through that, denial, anger, what if, bargaining, fear, and get them to acceptance as quickly as possible. What's your experience there? Do you think that works, or do you need to just give people the space?
I believe it's important to create an environment where people can feel safe to talk about how they're feeling. Ideally, you want to try to get people to the acceptance as quickly as possible, but understanding that everyone's going to go through different stages at different times. There's going to be some people that might stay in denial a little bit longer than they're going to stay in the bargaining, and doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the same order as well.
Mm,
So it depends on somebody's ability to adapt to change, as well as what are their personal circumstances. Somebody who is maybe maybe has some financial challenges, they might be in the fear area a little bit longer than maybe who somebody who has a nest egg, who knows that if layoffs were to happen again, that they have a nest egg to fall on. So
mm,
I really believe it's important that we meet people where they're at, give them a safe space to be able to share openly about how they're feeling, the good, the bad, the concerns, without feeling like there's any repercussions on what they're experiencing.
mm. And in a case where you're talking about, a big change, there's been a merger and acquisition, you've got
Mhm.
big layoffs, that's kind of potentially one of the most extreme circumstances of change that you might go through. But if you're talking then about the employees who stay behind, or in
Mhm.
a change environment where it's not layoffs, maybe it's just you're going through some kind of a change in ways of working, you're looking to make your business more profitable, so you're
Mhm.
changing some SOPs, that kind of thing. How do you support kind of the people who are staying? Because if you're sitting there and thinking, well, it doesn't really matter, there can't be any repercussions to my expressing my anger and fear because I've been laid off, that's one thing. But if you're not leaving and you want to create that psychological safety, how do you as a leader really help people to believe that
Mhm.
there will be no repercussions to them being honest about where they are?
Yeah, and that comes down to trust and vulnerability. In that particular situation, I learned early on that if a leader is vulnerable and shares their concerns, it does help create a safe environment for other people to share theirs. So I remember distinctly a leader that I had where she was upfront in saying, I don't necessarily agree with the company's decision and what they're doing. However, ultimately it is a decision that the company's made, and we're here to come together, and here's why they're making the decision. So sometimes just that vulnerability of sharing your own concerns, but ultimately bringing the team back together is a way to help lead that team forward. I also believe whether it's any change, whether you're going through layoffs, whether you're adopting a new CRM system, or for the industry that I was with, we had a new product launch every single quarter. So we were constantly going through change. And ultimately, it comes down to people want to know how the changes are going to affect them and their job, and what benefits are going to happen to them.
Mm,
So if you're integrating a new CRM system, how is it going to improve productivity for that individual? How is it going to help streamline their business? How is it going to make it easier? When you provide the why and how it benefits the individual, they're more likely to be receptive and accepting of the changes.
mm. Yeah, and that sort of what's in it for me kind of
Mhm.
idea, that like
Mhm.
obviously you can start with the point of this is the reality that faces us.
Mhm.
We don't actually have a choice about whether or not this is going to happen, so we do need to decide how we're going to make the best of it.
Mhm.
And I think, when you're in that sort of middle management position, that's quite often the line that you have to take with people, that
Mhm.
like, this is a decision that is made above my head, but we now have to make the best of it. And then yes, that frame of what's in it for us, what's in it for you,
Mhm.
um, can really help. Is that, because one of the other things that we were talking about in the beginning for this call was the idea around how you can re-engage people when they have gotten to a space of being disaffected or discouraged
Mhm.
or disengaged. And so do you start in the same place with that idea of like what's in it for you, or how would you go about that?
I believe it's important for people, in order for people to bring their whole selves to work, it's getting to know people beyond the professional, getting to know people. What are the names of their spouses or significant others, their partners, their kids? What are their core values? What are they motivated by? How do they, there's a great book that I teach on, which is The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace by Dr. Gary Chapman. And he talks about the different ways that people feel valued and appreciated in the workplace. And so I believe that when you really take the time to get to know your people beyond how they are at work, you can really understand why they make the decisions that they do, what they're motivated by, so that you can support them and meet them where they're at.
Mm. Can you tell us about a time when that's worked for you? Maybe you can think of an example where, to begin with, you didn't quite understand what was motivating someone and how those five languages really helped you.
Yeah. So, there's different people where the five languages of appreciation in the workplace is quality time, is acts of service, is words of affirmation, and tangible gifts, and then appropriate physical touch. I'm going to say appropriate physical touch. So that one
So
could
it's
be
like
high five.
the five love languages, but we've
Yes.
made them professional.
We made them professional. So, there's some people where, let's say, for example, words of affirmation is their language of appreciation. If I understand what their core values are, I may be able to incorporate their core values into ways that I am showing appreciation for somebody. So, for example, um, if accountability is somebody's core value, I might say, hey, Susie, I'm so appreciative of how you took lead on this particular project. I can always count on you to be a leader on among our team and to always show up authentically. So you can incorporate their core values into and really personalize the words of affirmation for that individual. If
Mm.
somebody's quality time, taking them out to lunch, spending some one-on-one time with them, getting to understand, really taking the time to understand what are their career aspirations, short term, long term. I believe that a lot of organizations will do annual performance reviews, and that tends to be the only time that they talk about career aspirations or
Mm.
building a career development plan for that individual. But a lot can happen in 365 days. A lot could happen professionally or personally in somebody's life. And so having continuous conversations about their career and what their aspirations are and what areas that they want to develop and what resources can you do to support them, I believe it's extremely important as well. So, acts of service could be helping them with a project. It could be, if you're working in an office environment, you notice that somebody is working really late hours. Maybe it's going and grabbing them a snack or a lunch, just participating and helping them out. So I believe that everyone feels valued differently. And the
Hmm.
more that we can tailor our approach to the individual, the more that that individual is going to feel valued and appreciated. And we know that when people feel acknowledged, valued, heard, appreciated at work, they're going to be more invested in the success of the organization.
For sure. And I think from what I always add for people is that it's also up to you as an individual to
Mhm.
communicate these things to your leadership as well. If they are not appreciating you in a way that you appreciate, then yeah, telling them, actually, do you know what? For me, I need to hear that I'm doing a good job.
Mhm.
Or for me, the way I understand that I'm doing a good job is because you give me the help I need on my project or
Mhm.
whatever it happens to be. And a lot of the time, I think there's almost like an expectation that either, well, your manager is psychic and they just know the right thing to do and they're going to get it right. Or
Yeah.
the one that I see so often is that it's like I just expect people to be as motivated as I am. I
Mhm.
tend to work with middle managers, women who are highly driven, they are really conscientious, they care deeply about doing a good job, about taking care of their team. And they will, if the work requires, they're
Mhm.
coming in early, they're staying late, they're frequently doing things like taking things off other people's plates to make sure that that person isn't overworked. And they just expect that everybody else is going to behave in the
Mm.
same way. And then they become quite angry when that doesn't
Resentful.
happen.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I think, I mean, is that something that you've seen in people that you've managed? Maybe you've experienced it yourself. I know I have. What advice do you have for someone who finds themselves sort of almost looking at their team going, why doesn't this person care as much as me?
Yes. Being in sales is very competitive, and I've always been very driven by achieving certain goals, certain accomplishments, always wanting to be a top performer, very motivated by money when I was in sales, mainly because to me, money gave me financial freedom to travel the world, to be able to give in the ways that I wanted to give to certain nonprofit organizations. And so that's always been my motivation. And I did struggle as a manager running a sales team and leading a sales team that not everybody had that same motivation. And that was hard for me. And so it was really understanding what motivated each individual person. So I had somebody on my team who was a performer, but never really got to the top of the performance. And so for me, it was understanding what was going on in their life. For them, they were going through a kitchen remodel. So I was like, oh, let's hit our quota so that we can, I know you're working on remodeling your kitchen and there's some different appliances that you want to get. My boss always used to joke with me. He's like, I always love when my sales reps would go and splurge on items because I know they'd always work harder to be able to pay for them. So it's really important to understand what motivates each person and understand that we are all different personalities. So I got certified in the DISC behavior model, which is a way of understanding how different personality types, who we are, and understanding that certain personalities thrive in certain roles.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can understand how another person responds or thrives in a particular role, we can ensure that they're in the right role. Sometimes if somebody's not performing, it could just be that they're not in the right role, but they're a good cultural fit for the organization. And so I think it's really important to incorporate personality assessments as well.
Mm. Yeah, I love having all of
Mhm.
those kind of tools at my disposal as well. The Gallup strengths and the
Mhm.
DISC and Myers-Briggs and all of those different personality types. But I think it's also important to say that if people are listening and they're thinking, look, I'm not certified in these things and I don't have time to go out or interest to go out and get certified in those things, that I mean, honestly, a lot of this you can uncover with just a conversation with someone. Going back to that original point that you made, if you can build the trust and the psychological safety
Mhm.
to allow people to really express what's happening for them, whether that's because you're going through a change and they're feeling one of those 5 stages, or because they're in the wrong role, or because your
Mhm.
motivational style is not clicking with them. If you can create that space, really, a conversation can
Mhm.
be the thing that unlocks, actually, I need to change the way I'm showing up to lead this particular person.
Mhm.
Even if you don't have, as I say, all of the extra tools, which are fun and interesting and
Yeah.
provide so much insight.
Yeah.
So we're coming up close to the end here. I'm really curious to know, Danielle, if you were talking to someone who's finding themselves in a similar situation to you at the beginning, maybe they're in a leadership role, they haven't had all the training and support that they would have liked, but they're really keen to do a good job. What's your top tip for
Mm.
someone in that space?
I would say invest in personal and professional development. It's one of the things I did early on in my career is I always had a mentor. And I believe that was extremely valuable because I had somebody who had the success that I wanted and they were able to guide me through the process of what steps to take, what steps to avoid, be able to have open, honest conversations. Now, sometimes that was individuals outside the organization, sometimes it was individuals inside the organization. As I have established myself more in my career, I have actually invested in coaches. So I wish that I had known about career coaches and leadership development coaches when I was in corporate, because one of the values I found in what I do now and what I've invested in myself is it's nice to have somebody who has an outside perspective and somebody that you can have open, honest conversations with and not feel like there's going to be any repercussions about how a colleague within your organization views you. So sometimes when we have a mentor within the organization, we don't want to be as completely honest about our concerns because we are scared that, oh, well, what will they think of me? But
Mm.
when you actually invest in a career coach outside of your organization, you can really be able to kind of pinpoint and drill down some of the concerns, some of the areas of development. I know that when I'm working with individuals, we do the DISC assessment right from the beginning. We work on specifically like what a career development plan is, and we work through some of oftentimes we'll jump on a call and they'll say, okay, here's some of the challenges that I'm going through right now. And we talk through them. So
Mhm.
I would say really invest in your professional development and seek somebody outside your organization and inside your organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you can't get the support from inside your organization, if it's not already available to you,
Mhm.
then taking that step yourself makes a huge difference. Even if it's only just so that you know that there isn't actually anything wrong with you as you're on the learning journey, and that
Yeah.
you have that safe space almost to make mistakes.
Mhm. Yeah.
So tell me, if anybody listening is thinking, you know what, I really enjoyed what Danielle has to say. I want to know more about her career in corporate, what she does now as an international speaker. Where can they find you,
Mhm.
connect with you, potentially work with you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms, but I'm most engaged on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my favorite platform. It's
Mine
really
too.
it's so much fun because you get to connect with people in a professional environment. I learn so much from LinkedIn as well, from the content creators that are on there, from the LinkedIn learning courses that are on there. But I also have a book. So my book, Unstoppable Grit, Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals, is available on Amazon, and the audiobook just released as well. But it became a bestseller in work-life balance, a bestseller in career advice. So I'm really excited because I'm already hearing feedback from readers that it's really resonating with them and helping them build a career in life that they love.
Oh, that is fantastic because I share that mission with you. I think, creating a life that you love, supported by a career that you love, is really the ideal, well, for me and for the people that I tend to work with as well, because you can over index on either
Mhm.
side, can't you?
Mhm.
And that balance does shift throughout the course of your life. But
Yes.
exciting. Thank you so much, Danielle, for joining me today. I have really enjoyed this conversation. And to everybody who was watching it then or watching it on the replay, do let us know in the comments what was the most interesting thing that came out for you. And if you have any further questions, you can find both of us on LinkedIn, and we are very happy to answer them and help you to find the career that is going to work best for you. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.